Hi, Amy from Mixing Babies in Business. I'm following up from previous live streams, and I want to ask you, how comfortable are you with going against conventional advice, or what is conventional in your industry? I've gone up to people at the start of my talk and I've asked them, excuse me, do you mind holding my baby so that I can load my pitch deck? Is there a baby change facility in this venue? I'm just going to pull out some snacks right now for my toddler during this job interview. Hopefully you don't mind. So those are some unconventional things that I've done in business settings. And when you start with asking the audience a question like that, going up to someone in the front row or posing a question of the audience, some people like to do a show of hands question, that can get people to switch from passive listening mode, like maybe scrolling their phone or not really paying attention to all the speakers if you're on a panel, or not really checked into the environment that they're in, and it can just really draw them in straight away to focus on you and listen to you. So previous weeks I've talked about different things that I've noticed that will get your audience to maybe pay attention a little bit better, ask Q&As, or come up with questions that maybe aren't super related to what you're talking about, or unconventional questions. And so this week I wanted to talk about the pattern that I've noticed, or the trend that I've noticed, that when I speak about something in an unconventional way, people sit up and pay attention. That's looked like speaking while I'm on stage, baby wearing, or with a toddler beside me. That's looked like giving advice that goes against the grain. So at the start of March 2020, when most people were asked to stay home, I had been working remotely since 2014. Before that, I'd been freelancing and doing contract work. So over, I'm going to age myself, but like 20 years, I'd been doing freelance or contract work alongside doing part-time or full-time employment. And since 2014, I was remote exclusively as a contractor freelancing. And I had done that overseas, so across 10 to 15 hour time differences with clients in the opposite side of the world. So when I was in Australia, they were in North America. When I was in Europe or North America, they were in Australia. Or when I was in Europe, they were in North America. So just like very, very different time zones. So that was remote. And I've also done it as a hybrid worker. So when we relocated to Canada, I brought my toddler to a job interview for a job that was maternity cover. And I not only got that contract, but I asked in the job interview if I could negotiate for flexibility. At the time, we didn't have childcare yet, so that's why I brought him to the job interview. We had just moved into our house, but that's a bit of a backstory aside. But the reason I was asked in March 2020 to speak about remote work with kids was because I had this experience of, at the time it was 6 years doing remote work, and a few years locally doing hybrid work, where I would do some time in the office or in the client's office or space, and then work remotely, usually from home or a third space like a coffee shop, library. Never had a co-working space membership. But that was just me. So the Women in Leadership Foundation asked me to speak about remote work with kids, or how do I do remote work with young kids. And at the time, my youngest was, he was 20 months old in March. And my oldest was, what was he? About 33 months. So like not just under 3 years old, and just under, just under 4 years old, and just under 2 years old and 4 years old. So sorry, that was wrong math. So not quite 4, not quite 2. Very much in the stage of, you cannot leave them alone in a room together. You cannot ignore them. You have to watch them. They need to be fed regularly. They cannot go to the washroom by themselves most of the time. The youngest was still in diapers, but he had conveniently stopped napping when he turned 18 months. So we had 2 kids that were young and not napping. And so my work windows were very small. And that talk, Women in Leadership Foundation, Ottawa chapter, I did a talk about remote work with kids, and there was another panelist who spoke about remote work, but she didn't have children. And so when we did the run through, I think it was a couple days before, a week before, and went over our slides, I listened to her presentation, I listened to her session, and I said, okay, now everything that she said, I'm going to flip it and tell you to do the total opposite or not do it at all. And it wasn't because her advice was wrong. It wasn't because her advice wouldn't work. But I had found, based on my own lived experience, that her advice would have applied to me when I was doing my digital nomad life, slow travel, work from anywhere, spend as long in a pub or a coffee shop or a third space as I want to, work, grind it out and do longer periods of time on project work, do things at odd hours. That doesn't work for me as a parent, I've found. And I've tried different things. And you very quickly realize that as soon as you have a device out and there's a child around, they believe you are not paying attention to them, which is true because your attention is divided. So you can do, though, I've experimented with different things. You can do housework, you can fold laundry, you can put dishes away, and they won't interrupt you in the same way. Isn't that interesting? But if you try to design a website or post to social media or take a client call, you better believe they're going to find a way to get in your space and be right there with you. Haven't had the same experience with finding socks and folding laundry personally. Let me know in the comments or, send me a message if your children are unicorn children and help you with housework all the time when you're trying to do housework but leave you alone when you're trying to do content editing or make a slide deck, because that has not been my reality. And I've tested it with 3 different children, all boys, under the age of 9 years old right now. So I've tested it at different ages, different stages, different children. And that's not what I'm finding. So my advice at the time was based on my lived experience of being a mom of 2 kids under the age of 4 and having done remote work and hybrid work and contract freelance work before having kids and after having kids. And this presentation was very much, this is what I've learned, this is what I've done, this is what I've tested and experimented with, and this is what might help you. So I'm actually doing a session next week for a corporate client about that. And I do topics for people, virtual topics, primarily right now on pitching and presenting with kids, remote work with kids, showing up with your kids. I'm going to be doing some webinars on that, just entering business spaces with your kids, as well as more digital marketing skills. So like how I do my newsletters to get people, I have a good open rate on those, how I do my podcast, stuff like that. So upskilling, but also inclusion and you could say like workplace well-being and corporate culture is the other topic areas. But all of the stuff that I share is like, yes, I studied marketing and journalism. I have technical skills in those areas, but there's no school of parenting. It's just you learn it as you go. And maybe you had a good childhood and good examples around you and a good village around you and good community around you, and maybe you didn't. And you're maybe going to do things differently than your predecessors did or your parents or your ancestors did. So my, takeaway for you this week is the trend that I've noticed is around convention, and whether your advice is conventional, as in it's going to blend in and be harder to stand out, or it goes against convention, it's unconventional and it goes against the grain. And that's kind of more where my advice is coming from. Sorry, I just got to switch hands again. So I would encourage you to look at how does your lived experience differ from conventional advice. And you'll notice this if you go into a bookshop and you look at personal finance, or you look at business, or you look in well-being, or if you're like me, you look in astrology. And a lot of them, the bindings, the covers, the the resources, the bylines, even like the subtitles, and like, do they have 2 words for a title, or is it like a statement? You'll probably notice this with like a lot of curse words right now in a lot of books. And does it stand out to you? Does it jump off the table to you? Does it jump off the shelf to you? And you'll notice, like in personal finance or in business, there's a lot of blue or red, power colors. And as soon as someone comes out with like a purple and gold, or more of like a gradient of different colors, you're going to notice that stand out in a bookshop. Or if it's a title that is very different. I'm trying to think of one that I know that doesn't have a swear word in it that I've bought. So for example, I'm reading one right now about rituals, mindset, and it does cover astrology, tarot, meditation, mindfulness, but it's called Burn Your SH*T. And it is something that, I don't have it with me right now, but it is something that jumps off the shelf. And every time I've posted pictures of it, people are like, "Oh, what's that book? Who wrote that book?" Another one I have in my bag. I was just at the passport renewal office and I got some heavy reading here. Money Diaries. This is 2018 reading, Refinery 29. So almost, advice that is 6-7 years old. But this is a great example of lived experience being important, because this is not a venture fund or stock market expert written book. This is women who've written into Refinery 29, who've shared their lived experience. They're sharing their salary, how they spend their money, how they live their day, what money they save or don't save, what their current debt is. And what I've done, which is similar to that with mixing babies and business, is I have come up with some tools and resources based on my lived experience, but I started off with blogging and posting on social media and sharing my lived experiences, my photos, here's what happened when I brought my toddler to this job interview, here's what happened when I tried to do a pitch in a boardroom versus in front of an audience. Those are things that can help other people, even if you're not the expert, even if you don't have the degree in whatever you're talking about. Someone can recognize themselves in your story. So do not underestimate that. And I'd like you to, at some point, if you feel called to do it, sit, journal it out, use a pen and paper, don't use your phone, put pen to paper or pencil to paper. Or if you're like me, chalk to the kids' chalkboard or whiteboard markers, and just write out some things that you have a different spin on, or a different twist on, different perspective, that might help people learn in a different way or hear themselves in your own story and experience. So thank you for listening to this car park live stream this week. I'm sorry I missed last week, but I was very sick and I did not sound, I'm still getting over it, but I did not sound very good. And I didn't think it would be a good time to do a recording. And so next week, I'm doing a presentation on remote work with kids, or navigating hybrid work environments for a client. And I would love to do another live stream here after that, just kind of once I've delivered that session. And I'm going to talk about how I now, with AI at my disposal, wasn't at my disposal years ago, may prepare for a talk where I want to make sure that I'm prepared for some unconventional questions or things that might come up, and ways that I might look after my mindset, my preparation, and my well-being before going into a speaking engagement, and how I might prepare for that. So I will be back later next week with a live stream on that, and I hope you have a wonderful week. Thanks for listening.